You're missing a chair? Maybe the cleaning people.
Do we have an empty one in the back?
Yeah, I thought you were in the back too. Steve gave you a signed seat. After I said you had no signed seat. Okay, you maybe. Take more than a bathroom break or whatever, and you just need to be patient. We're trying to move the trial along, okay? So, thank you. All right, before, and I'm sorry, I don't, this probably isn't the most appropriate time, but media and media in the war room, or whatever we call it, one more cup, and everybody is not allowed to bring any liquids of any kind whatsoever. My staff is, and our county people are not going to be picking up trash that you all could pick up. Okay, and that also means downstairs in the jury assembly room. So one more cup, one more water. Let's just have some manners on picking up after ourselves, okay? All right, sorry I had to bring that up right now.
Is this witness still under oath, Judge?
Yes, she's still under oath. Is that okay, or do you want me to?
That's fine.
All right.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Good morning, Investigator Pop.
Good morning.
Judge.
All right, why don't we look at these now?
Okay.
Is this, are you keeping track?
Yeah, that's okay with the court. Okay, good morning again.
Good morning.
So we saw a lot of pictures yesterday and heard about some search warrants that were conducted that you were present for. And I'd like to sort of divide what we do this morning into sort of two categories, the firearm and the ammunition. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. As to the firearm, I think where you left off yesterday is ultimately that firearm was destroyed in the testing. Fair?
Not destroyed, but broken.
Yeah, the word broken, that I think I heard you use yesterday, it's fair to say that the firearm can't be put back in the original condition that it was in at the time of the incident. Is that fair?
I believe it could be put back together with replaced parts, but as far as, in my terms, destroyed meaning no longer in existence, it is not the case.
Right. No, of course. The gun and its broken parts still exist, right?
Yes.
But as being part of the investigation and entrusted with the evidence in this case, the gun will never be in exactly the same condition that it was in on October 21st. Fair?
Yes.
Then I want to talk to you now about the ammunition piece of this. And the investigation into the source of the lethal bullet in this case led you to executing a search warrant at Seth Kenny's prop house, right?
Yes.
And you knew that he had provided star-line brass, silver ammunition to the set, correct?
Yes.
What you were investigating at that time was whether it was star-line brass, silver, and only dummies, or if it was star-line brass, silver, and he also had live ammunition at his prop house, correct?
Yes.
And you did know that Seth Kenny kept live ammunition at his prop house, correct?
I believe at that time we were looking for live ammunition, yes.
Right, but you were aware of whether you found the exact correct live ammunition that matched perfectly the live ammunition on the movie set. You did ultimately recover some live ammunition, and you had probable cause to get a search warrant, right?
Yes.
And did that concern you that at a prop house that's sending out ammunition for movie sets, that there was both live ammunition and dummy rounds?
Yes.
So I want to take a step back for a second. When you go out to collect evidence on a day like October 21st, 2021, you bring with you your Nikon camera, right?
Yes.
You have gloves with you, right?
Yes.
And in a perfect world, you're trying to get to the evidence and the state of the evidence as quickly as possible. Fair?
Yes.
And so you did respond to this scene, and the first item that you collected that ended up broken was the prop gun, right?
Yes.
And when you got there, you knew that someone had touched it without gloves on, right?
Yes.
You knew that when somebody collected it, they didn't take a photo, right?
Yes.
But you did take that into evidence, and that was sort of the first item in this case that you were collecting and entrusted to keep vouchered and maintained for the course of this investigation. Is that fair?
Yes.
And it was a critical piece of evidence. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And so as you continue after that moment into the scene, you're looking for additional evidence. Fair?
Yes.
And physical evidence is critical evidence in an investigation, right?
Yes.
Because, witnesses and their memories can change. Witnesses can say one thing one day and another day, but physical evidence pretty much stays the same, right?
I'm just objecting to a compound question.
Physical evidence stays the same, right?
Yes.
And you logged all the evidence you collected in this case?
Yes.
And all the evidence collected by law enforcement in this case was ultimately logged by you?
Yes.
And by logging it, you also make it available for the defense so that we have visibility into what in fact you collected.
Yes.
And one way you figure out as you're going through a scene what evidence is relevant is you can talk to your fellow officers, right?
Yes.
You can talk to witnesses, right?
I do not. As part of I'm not an investigator, I'm a technician. So my concern is with the physical evidence. I don't do any of the interviews.
No, I know you don't do formal interviews, but in this case you did talk to Seth Kenny, right? You're not forbidden to speak to somebody who's at a scene.
No, I do believe we had some casual conversations, yes.
Well, but there are times where a witness could say in your presence, hey, that glove is very important. And they would say it to you and Corporal Hancock, and you would
I
know.
object to the hypothetical.
Overruled.
As I was saying, you and Corporal Hancock could be at a scene, and somebody could say, hey, that glove was used, and you, as a technician, would say, okay, that witness is pointing out that glove, that could be important, I'm going to note that, and once I confirm with Corporal Hancock, potentially take that into custody, to take an inventory.
Yes,
Okay.
that's something that could happen, yes.
And the other thing that you do is, and you talked about this a little bit on your direct, which is you can learn information and decide what to forensically test. Fair?
Yes.
So in this case, for example, Mr. Baldwin's clothes had red on them, and you tested it for blood, right?
Yes.
And it turned out it was movie set blood, right?
Yes.
Meaning it wasn't actually blood.
Correct.
Right? Okay. So as you continue through the scene, you get to the prop cart, and you find the shell casing. And I thought this was on just a moment ago.
All right, Joe, come on up. We need to fix something.
You're doing what to the document?
Yeah, this is that.
Just in the way. It was up there. It was up there that you had a problem.
And I'm putting State's Exhibit 29.
I'm just a minute, Mr. Spiro. I'm wondering if
Oh.
you're trying to figure this out right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. And I'm showing you Exhibit 29, and in a moment I'll show you Exhibit 28. And this is the shell casing that you recovered in this case that housed the lethal projectile, correct?
Yes.
And so, and in fact, you were able to then recover the actual bullet piece of the ammunition because you learned from Mr. Baldwin that it was at the hospital with Mr. Souza, right?
Yes.
And so you were then able to go to the hospital, and we heard from that officer, and collect the other piece of the ammunition, correct?
Yes.
And that's an example, right, of learning something from a witness and making a decision based on it, right?
Yes.
Okay. And as to the prop gun, because you learned from Mr. Baldwin that he just manipulated the hammer, you didn't test the trigger of the firearm, correct?
I'm sorry. You're asking if I myself tested the...
Trigger, yeah.
I'm not qualified to do that, so it was not completed by myself.
Well, fair to say that because you learned that from Mr. Baldwin, it impacted the way that you evaluated the evidence in this
I
case.
object to the form of question. Can we approach?
You spoke to Mr. Baldwin at the scene, correct?
Briefly, yes.
Okay. And he informed you that he just manipulated the hammer, and that impacted your future testing, correct?
I don't recall what he exactly stated on the scene.
Okay. Well, let me just approach you for a moment.
Counsel, I'll need a copy.
Sure. We'll provide you a copy.
Before you approach the witness.
We're also going to need, while they're looking for that, why don't we approach? Page and line, please.
Yep.
Page and line, counsel.
Yep. Page 3, lines 9 through 11. And I'm showing the witness. Does this, and as you can see from up here, this is a lapel camera from 1021, a lapel recording from. And do you see this answer here?
Yes, I see it.
And so, does that refresh your recollection that Mr. Baldwin told you that he cocked the gun?
I don't recall that conversation.
Okay. But you don't dispute that it happened?
No, I don't dispute it. I just don't recall it.
So, did... but when you made the request...
Objection, let's approach.
Just to go back to the spent shell casing for a moment, was the spent shell casing collected from inside of the church or on the cart?
On the cart.
And another question is, do you know if Mr. Baldwin's fingerprints or DNA were on the trigger of the firearm?
I do not know those results off the top of my head.
Okay. Is there a better witness that may come in to tell the jury that?
Yes.
Okay. And, you know, you were interacting, as we were left off, with Mr. Baldwin at the scene and spoke to him, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And after speaking to him, did you, in fact, test the hammer of the... Did you, in fact, request to test the hammer of the firearm for prints and DNA?
Same objection. That doesn't lay the foundation. It has to go to why she did what she did.
It's the first question, and then I'll ask why she did or didn't.
Overruled.
Did you, after speaking to Mr. Baldwin, did you then test the hammer of the gun for DNA or fingerprints, or request that it be done?
The request that was made was after a conversation with the lab, which essentially was asking them what assistance they could provide. I believe the request was made for latents and DNA. I don't recall the specifics of what on the item they were going to specifically test. I don't know their requirements or standards when they receive a firearm. Most labs would do the testing on the entirety of the gun, but they might break it down further and do just the trigger, just the hammer, just the rough areas. I'm not certain. That's a question for their lab.
Right, but I'm just asking you, Investigator Papa, when you made the request, did you specify, you know, given what we've learned now, we really want you to check the hammer specifically? Did you make that request?
I don't recall specifically requesting that.
And when you got to the prop cart, you could not tell from looking at it whether or not anybody had altered or moved any of the evidence, correct?
Correct.
And if somebody did, that would be a pretty serious problem in a case like this, wouldn't it?
It would be a problem in any case, yes.
Did you ever interview or review any interviews of Sarah Zachary?
No.
But one thing that you did know at this time, for certain, is that you were looking for Starline brass silver .45 ammunition, correct?
At that time, no, we did not know that that's what we were looking for.
When did you learn that?
That was learned later on once realizing that all of our suspected live rounds were Starline brass with a silver primer.
So all of the live rounds at the movie set were Starline brass, nickel primer, live, right?
Yes.
And this idea came up early in the investigation that what if somebody sabotaged the set and put those live rounds there? Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that was quickly dismissed in this case as not something that law enforcement thought to be realistic. Fair?
Yes.
But you also needed to investigate whether somebody from outside of the Rust set was responsible for injecting these live ammunition into the Rust set. Fair?
Yes.
And so you continue to investigate that as this case proceeds, and you executed search warrants, correct?
Not myself personally investigating it, but I believe that was something that was being investigated.
So, you know, we looked at, and I'm just going to show you Defense A1. And what's this a picture of?
These were some of the rounds that were located loose on top of the cart.
And these live rounds being loose on top of the cart, I mean, you don't know whether those live rounds were there at the time of the incident, right?
Correct.
And again, these were all Starline brass, nickel primer, live, correct?
Yes.
And you were also not certain at times when you would collect rounds, whether or not they were live or dummies.
Correct.
Some rounds you submitted to the FBI to process to figure that out.
Yes.
And if we could look at State's Exhibit 27, can you tell me what that is?
This is a photograph of the silver primers on the 2 rounds that were later discovered to be live that were on the top of the cart.
And so in this box you then collect, which is Defense A2. Right, what was your understanding of this box?
My understanding was this was the box handed to Lieutenant Benavidez that was being pulled from at the time to load the firearm. I was then placed in his unit and later collected by myself.
And when you looked inside of that box, State's Exhibit 17, what did you find?
These were the rounds inside of the box.
And can you tell the jury the significance of that round?
Yes, this round with the silver primer was a live round.
But you don't know whether somebody was rifling through this box and just missed one, do you?
No.
And you also showed the jury that these Starline brass nickel live rounds were found in other places on the set, right? This is State's Exhibit 16.
Yes.
And what is this?
This is a close-up of one of the gun holsters that has a live round in it.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 15.
This is a close-up of the gun holster that was belonging to Mr. Baldwin that has a live round in it.
And was then 15, this is 15. Was 16 the one that was the other actor, Jason Eccles?
Yes.
Okay. And so Mr. Eccles, another actor on the set, turns out that he, as he acted, as he performed, had a live bullet in his bandolier, correct?
Yes.
And you have no reason to think Mr. Eccles had any idea that was there, right?
Correct.
Your working theory, as you evaluated the ammunition and looked at the similarity between the Starline nickel live and the Starline nickel dummies, is that they could have been easily commingled. Fair?
Yes.
In other words, somebody could have mistaken one for the other, right?
Yes.
And so when you conduct then a search warrant on the church, you find additional evidence, right?
Yes.
And you talked about search warrants in your direct examination, but I just want to orient the jury a little bit to what that is. A search warrant is where you go to a court and you swear out a warrant, and the warrant tells you what you can search for inside of a dwelling or a location, right?
Yes.
And you tell the court what information you have and what you'd like to look for. Fair enough?
Yes.
And unlike somebody sort of walking into the precinct and voluntarily giving you evidence, one of the things about a search warrant is you don't have to tell the person you're coming before you go, right?
Yes.
So as you're going in to execute the search warrant on the church, and the warrants in this case, you did discuss that with Corporal Hancock, correct?
Yes, I believe we had some brief conversations about the search warrants.
And the warrant for the church, it didn't indicate that there was any specific crime you were looking for. Is that fair?
I don't recall.
And so when you went inside of the church, you were looking for evidence, right?
Yes.
And you remember, as you ended your direct examination yesterday, Ms. Morrissey, the prosecutor, said, you keep all of this evidence so that if anyone who wants to bring any evidence, you have it, right?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things you found in the church was the shot list for the dead, right?
I don't recall that.
You don't. Do you recall collecting paperwork inside the church?
Yes.
Okay. And
Your Honor, I've already indicated to Mr. Spiro that I object to some of these, so we can approach now. I wish we had dealt with it previously.
no, I think I can just lay it and introduce it.
Well, she said she objected. Please don't talk among yourselves or anyone else about the evidence received here in court.
All rise for the jury.
All right, we're going to recess.